Oh, oh, God, the fucking Morse. Ah! Oh my God. You're not my guest. Well, hello, everyone. This is an interesting encounter. We must be in the moors. I went off the trail. This is day 17 of 31 days of horror movies with friends. Welcome. I'm Andy Green, aka Wolfmandy Screame. And this week we're talking werewolves, as you might see right there. And as always, we got horror movies, we got drinks, and we got friends. And without further ado, I mean, you can see my main guest here, but I believe, I don't know, could we get Dylan Ezzie of Horrific Finds there? Werewolf, please, David, can we?
I do believe we can, actually. Just chilling here with friends. You know, you gotta first introduce the big guy, and then I come second.
Yeah, they're the star. Dylan, thank you so much for joining us. And how is the fur? How is that coat?
Oh, this fur is actually yak fur. This is my artist out in California, and it took me 5 years to find this baby. And he is the centerpiece of my collection, and thus I would say the centerpiece of Horrific Finds.
There you go. And so I guess you might have, even by saying the centerpiece, there's no question why we're watching these movies today, then, right?
No, werewolves are my heart and soul. If I could be any monster outside of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, I would be a werewolf.
Okay. I like the caveat there, secretly in there. Well, and I want to know more about that. But before we do, let's put a pin on that, because that's a good, because I want to talk. I think I feel the same way.
Okay.
I've always been, Wolfmandy, here we go. Although
obviously, right?
Yeah.
Here next to my friend. And
does he have a name besides just, we just call him David because that's what he is?
A little. I know another person that owns one of these. There aren't many in the world, but he named his Bruce. So I always thought like, oh, it's Bruce, but David, Kessler, all of them work, and just.
Or just Wolf Buddy. Yeah.
Your awesomeness, I'll go with that as well.
You're awesome. Okay.
Awesome. That works.
And then we of course have a Yoda ear behind you, which is.
We got a little Yoda ear here. And of course, where can you go anywhere without a melting Chucky just seeping?
Oh man, melting Chucky.
Seeping right in there. So the werewolf's got friends. Let's just say that he's got some buddies.
Yeah, and he doesn't eat them. He eats the other people you don't want in your house.
Exactly, among friends, right?
And so what movies are we watching today? What was our double feature?
Well, if I think I remember correctly, I believe we watched an American Werewolf in London. Of course, we also watched The Howling.
The Howling.
Of course.
Both being made in 1981, they kind of go a little hand in hand.
Absolutely. They both even feature scenes in porn theaters. So
most importantly, that's the key element to their success in both films.
It wouldn't. Yeah. It's an interesting parallel. I was like, but we got London and we got CDLA.
And Dee Wallace, from what I know, hated doing that scene. Very uncomfortable. Like, her being uncomfortable in that scene is real. That's not like a fake thing. Like, that was the things those two scenes, the pornographic scenes in those playing like in the background, were made specifically for the movie. And like, it was just like an uncomfortable experience to be in that theater. It's kind of uncomfortable to watch. So
yeah, it is. I read that too. I was like, this was a great Dee Wallace performance, a great performance. Great all around. And those movies, The Howling is available on, if you haven't seen it somehow, we got to see it. It's on Movie Sphere is how I actually watched it. I got a free trial through Amazon Prime. And then got to remember to cancel it, set that alarm. Don't let them win. Don't let the streamers win. And then after that, the American Werewolf in London is on Peacock TV.
Excuse me.
Before we go, we don't forget to look at the moon here. We gotta have some coffee. This is
absolutely. I'll grab my cup here. I tried to find, of course, got to get something with a Wolfman on there, a little Universal monster action going on. It's a good time all around.
And both of these movies owe a lot to the Universal. Just canon, but The Howling has clips from it. like multiple times. And then this one references a lot. So this one is, don't forget to look at the moon. It is a blend of 70% Peru. And ooh, let's get that. Oh, it's beautiful.
The suspense there, just to make sure it all happened perfectly. That was well done.
Yeah. I just actually spilled it all over my lap. I'm just holding that. And then 30% Ethiopian is the other part of this. And Little Waves Coffee is they actually a finalist for Roaster of the Year for this year. Hopefully they win. They are out of Durham, North Carolina. And let's get my first sip in here.
Cheers, sir.
Cheers. Ooh. How does that hit your tongue? The fangs.
That's right. Come on. The tongue. I mean, that's the better question is how would it hit his tongue? Like, could he be even more awake if he had this coffee? I think so. I think he would. The rampage would like double and London would just be torn apart with a little sip of this coffee.
That's terrifying. That's a terrifying thought. Oh my God, this movie's so cool and great, but also like I feel like it's saying something beyond just carnage. Same with The Howling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, in so many levels. When I think of The Howling, just the commentary on horror films in general.
Yes.
In every scene, there's a little Easter egg to be found. I mean, just pictures of Lon Chaney all over the place, or what's playing on the TV in the background, or the book that they're reading, or like just like every scene, the more you watch it, the more you pick up on. And you're like you just kind of nerd out on the fact that like besides just the practical effects and the great story and like just all the fun that you have, there's so much to be seen in all the corners of your screen, which is just fantastic. I mean, I love that in any film, but especially The Howling. Joe Dante knew what he was doing and he just kind of got right in there and just tore the genre apart and threw everything in the kitchen sink included, and such a good time.
And when Joe Dante, of course, is like one of the original monster kids. And I was going to ask you, was Dick Miller's shop one of your inspirations? Is that like what you're going for?
Always, the more the merrier, right? I mean, to me, chaos it's beautiful. Everywhere is great.
Reality is chaos, so why not embrace it?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate Dick Miller as always. And I'm sure you know this, but Forey Ackerman was in that scene too, right? Forrest Ackerman of Famous Monsters, which I know Joe Dante was a huge fan of. Yeah. So that's like one of many, as you said, Easter egg. On the coffee front, what fictional werewolf do you think, like either, I mean, is this our boy Kessler's copy, you think? Or does it remind you of anyone else? Like what, are we getting any?
I mean, there's something very classic about it. There's something I really like a lot. And so whenever I think classic, I think Lon Chaney. Like we're back to
the original. Yes.
And with the screen that's changing and he's slowly fading into a werewolf and fading out of when the hair's there and then gone. And like, that's what I'm feeling a little bit here.
That I agree. And I think it might be because I'm sweating like crazy because I'm wearing
right now with the jacket and I get that.
I'm wearing a winter coat for no reason while having hot coffee in LA when it's 85 degrees outside. So
there's a fire going that we can't see. I understand. This is what happens.
This is what happens.
Character.
This is my transformation. I have to do it. If I can't survive, well, I don't deserve to be here. That's how I'm thinking about it.
It happens. He starts feeling hot. So you're just trying to, start sweating. You got to, if the moon isn't out yet, you got to create it yourself. Just start.
Well, The Howling, speaking of nudity, The Howling, well, actually both movies have a lot of it, but The Howling is a lot. Like, I think every good monster movie is a metaphor for something. And for this werewolf movie, it's sort of about, well, I mean, it's definitely about relationships breaking down, infidelity, divorce, and just sort of sexual problems, right? Because like Dee Wallace and, oh God, what's his what's the name of the character in it?
I know. What is the name of that's what I'm always terrible at, is remembering the actual names of the characters.
I don't know if it necessarily matters, but I remember weirdly Terry and Christopher, the two reporters that are like investigating. And then I just think of D. Wallace as D. Wallace.
I mean, I know you can't not think of D. Wallace as D. Wallace. Like,
right.
It's so funny. I didn't until I got older, you know, when you Cujo and talk, just bringing in a couple other horror movies, like you get to know her in horror films. And then I realized, oh yeah, when I was like 5 years old, I would watch her in E.T. all the time. And you like kind of just forget that she was the mother in E.T. It just, for me, at least, that was my first introduction to her.
Right. I think for all of us, our age or our generation, and it's also, of course, like Steven Spielberg knew he loved Cujo. He loved probably all these movies. And it's like a referential thing. And it's the same way that Joe Dante is now building his own universe with Dick Miller and all of his pals. That sort of continue out, just like the Universal monster movies, which is that's what I love about art and movie and monster movies and horror in general. They're so self-referential. They're they're sort of all connected and all not necessarily taking themselves too seriously either. That's at least at their best.
I think there's something to the effect of in horror, if a horror movie takes itself too seriously, there's such a fine line that a horror movie runs between the fantastic and the unbelievable, and then where that little in between where you kind of get pulled in and you're in this world and you live there. And when the film takes itself a little too seriously, almost as a viewer, it makes you look at it in a comedic way.
Yes.
Like, ridiculous. Like, come on, guys, like lighten up a little bit. Everything's going to probably be okay, or you're going to die either way. Shit's going to happen. So don't worry about it.
Right.
And I definitely agree with that idea that like, there's just, to make a great horror film, which both The Howling and American Werewolf are, there's got to be a little element of comedy, and you have to kind of laugh at yourself a little bit and pay homage to what came before and just be like, yeah, we know what we're doing. We know this stuff exists. Let's have fun with it and enjoy ourselves. And I think that's a key element to both these films, but just horror in general, because I think it's very successful films and just wonderful experiences.
A naked American man stole my balloons. What?
Back to The Howling. I mean, I think this one, to me, I think let's talk about the effects a little bit, because this is Rob Bottin, but like Baker does get credited as like sort of an advisor in it. And I know you had a story about that, or like, wasn't Baker supposed to be working on The Howling? And then
supposed to, and he got pulled off about 6 months, I believe, or so before to work on American Werewolf in London. And so then Rob Bottin like was, oh, we have a visitor.
Oh, the werecat.
Oh, but hiding behind the cop. Oh, the werecat has arrived.
Yes. Oh.
From off the moors, just.
Yes.
Did you hear that? I heard that. What was it? Could be a lot of things.
So yeah, Rob Bottin suddenly gets this project and become both of them at the same time. Just they come out both in 1981, and it just practical effects wise, neither had like it just never had been on the screen before. And the goal for both films was, I mentioned before how, you know, in old werewolf movies there would be like the scene changes where while you're watching it, suddenly it's like you can obviously tell different clips are being put in, or the, you know, the camera pans away and then it comes back and they've got hair on the face, and it pans away and then it comes back and he's got long teeth. This was like, we are going to put the camera on the screen, we are not moving it, and you are going to watch this happen whether you like it or not.
Yes.
It was just amazing. And of course, I always feel American Werewolf in London won the Academy Award and, you know, killed it. But personally, when it comes to grotesque werewolf transformations, The Howling takes the cake.
I think grotesque is the right word. There's something
and like
bubbling. Yes.
Like, oh my gosh, this is truly terrifying and terrible. Like, you always fantasize, or at least I do, about being a werewolf. And I don't know if I would fantasize about transforming like that.
Yeah, I think we'd rather have the Lon Chaney transformation where we just get a little hairier. But they're both so visceral, the transformations, and the one we see with Eddie Quist, like Robert Picardo, like it's so cool. And yeah, like you said, the bubbling to me is so cool. It's like a science experiment gone wrong. And that's kind of what a monster is in some way. And it's just pulsating, weird. Like, it's not what you would think it would look like, but it works so perfectly.
it's everything you would think like from a B horror movie in the 1950s where the monster is becoming the monster. Like that's a little bit of what you're witnessing, but instead of just like a random alien coming out of a swamp, you're seeing someone turn into this creature that you know so well, but in such a terrible way.
Yes. Well, and I think it does owe a lot to that B movie thing. And what's so cool about it is, yeah, you know, it's like, okay, it's kind of ridiculous on its surface watching this, but it's so gruesome. There's so much pain in both of the transformations we see, or all of the transformations. I just like the artistic license. They're each a little bit different. Like the Howling, they like they have those crazy pointy ears when they're fully formed, and just like there's no one werewolf that's the same, and that's what's so cool. But and then I guess if we jump to American Werewolf in London, how would you describe that transformation? And like what makes it different?
I mean, the first thing I think of is heat, which I really like, is the idea that, because these actually are things I think about. I'm actually being serious about that. I wrote a werewolf novel myself that I'm still working on. And like, one of the things there's two things I always think about with werewolves. One is the idea that like, and something I think that even in future films would be cool to see more of, is the idea that like, you always think of the transformation, the hair growing. But I love the idea that he's tearing off his shirt and he's sweating profusely. And it's like your body, your whole body, it's not just you're going to start sprouting hair. You're like the heat, the intensity, the transformation that's taking place underneath the skin before you see something visually, I find really, really interesting. I think that's a really cool concept that is often overlooked in films and stories sometimes, where it goes right to the hair. And it's like, just to take that moment of like, what happens before that? What do you feel like before you start growing hair? Like, what's your body going through?
Jesus Christ! Without a dream, God!
And I think American Werewolf in London does a great job of that, as he's pacing the apartment, he's sweating, and he's, oh my God, he's tearing off his, and it's like, you really see the pain of what's going to come, but even as it's starting, which I really enjoyed.
Then suddenly there appears.
And then the pain begins and the fingers elongate and the jaw pops out and the back, you know, like in that, and then you're suddenly in it, which I really, really, really enjoyed that experience, so to speak. Because I thought it really was an experience for that scene. You watch this person go from ground zero to 100% as a werewolf, which was really cool.
I like the heat thing for sure. It's almost like a chemical reaction, you know, sort of this, like these two things, human, wolf, are just sort of thrown together. And obviously a wolf has way different organs and bone structure than us. And so just imagine that fucking happening inside you.
Before anything visual happens.
Yeah, right. Before, yeah, because it makes sense. It goes inside out. Right. Yeah. So like all those different, your heart is probably moving other places. And, you know, like I can't even imagine how painful that is. And then I love the stretching as well. Ooh, I got the sun coming in here. A nice, like
a nice tint going on here.
Yeah, like a hazy glow here in the moors.
I feel like as the screen's gonna change, and when it comes back, I'm gonna be looking at it like this is step one. Step two will be the things to more hair fading away.
To me, the stretching is just so cool. And that's the other word, heat. And for me, it was stretching and sort of just each body part elongating, the snout, the hands, the feet, and the spine. And it's just, and he's sort of coming out of himself in a way. It's sort of like a hatching. These are just sort of effects movies. I mean, just brilliant effects movies, but thankfully there's more going on. What would you say the sort of the metaphor is going on in American Werewolf in London?
You don't understand what's going on.
I mean, with some of the sexual overtones, obviously, even those playful as they are,
right?
There's definitely idea of man versus beast. Like, here's this guy in a new area, in a new city, and he's sleeping with his nurse within like 24 hours, basically.
There's a lot of fantasy in that. Yes.
Yeah. Like but just the idea of like man and like just man versus beast, like what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. and how we perceive that, and having fun with it, obviously.
Right.
But an undertone there, and then the best friend coming back and being like, you shouldn't be doing this. Like, this isn't right. Like, this is not cool. And he's like, it's fine. Like, whatever. Like, let me live my life. And it's like, yeah, but you know, like,
don't let the monster inside come out.
not cool, dude.
I think that also is definitely The Howling as well,
Definitely
right?
in The Howling. I mean, the whole idea of The Howling is the getaway camp. I mean, all that, it's definitely there.
Well, yeah, the colony to go, but like even the opening scene of the movie is the doctor talking about that on the news about like, oh yes, the primordial battle between, you know, whatever, the man and beast, and like coming in, you have to accept the beast.
Jack was right. Jack is dead.
Especially in terms of the backdrop of this project for me, because, you know, I lost a friend this year, and there's a lot about survivor's guilt to me. There's a lot about grief and the fact that, you know, his friend dies, he's seeing, and mental health, and like he's seeing his friend, and he can't he feels terrible that he's alive and his friend is not, but also like you said, he's distracted by the nurse, and also like, I'm alive, I want to keep going or be, sure. But he's haunted by it, you know, and he was also traumatized too. And then you add the layer of the nurse, kind of definitely an unethical relationship. Like a
little bit.
Like she's definitely into him. And so it's not like, but like he is having psychological problems, and he is being so honest too.
I'm a werewolf.
Like he's not lying to her at all. He's like, oh yeah, I just saw my dead friend and I think I'm a werewolf. And she's just like, let's have sex. And he's like, okay.
Don't worry about it. We'll worry about that later, bro.
Yeah, this nurse needs to be fired.
Going back really fast, just a question for you for fun is the transformation, right? And I always wonder, and maybe this has been addressed in some werewolf films, where does the hair go once they turn back into a human? I'm just,
That's a good question.
It's never really addressed. Does it get sucked back into the body? Does it fall out? Does it just magically disappear? Like in maybe the original Wolfman, like it's just poof gone.
Yeah.
Where does the hair go? Because it's very painful for it to come out, clearly. Is it just as painful for it to go back in? I feel like there's something missing in the genre where like we need to witness that as well.
I think I want to see just piles of hair when he wakes up, you know?
Right? It's never there. It's always them naked in the bushes. Like,
yes.
Where did the hair go? What happened to it?
It's kind of like the Hulk, you know, where, I mean, he always has his shorts somehow, but where did everything else go? But like, at least, but they're addressing it, you know, in some way. I agree. I've never thought about that. It's sort of like, I wonder if
the things that keep me up at night. I'm telling you, I lay up bed and be like, where did the hair go?
Well, I mean, I know there's a lot of people that stay up at night wondering where the hair went.
That's right.
And I'm wondering if maybe there's a lot of bald men that write werewolf things to like dream to get the hair back.
This is a common thing. See how these movies are they're primal. It just attacks these social issues that are very important.
All anyone can do is watch.
Speaking of Primal, you said that you wanted to be a werewolf, like that. If you could, aside from Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I was wondering why that is. Like, what's appealing?
It's just, I think when I was younger is where this comes from the most. And my werewolf did arrive. He's back here.
Oh, and Smeagol, or I mean, I guess Gollum. Yeah.
When I was younger, I loved the Universal monsters. I suppose that was my introduction to horror. I think it was for a lot of younger kids. And,
yes, me too.
And the Creature from the Black Lagoon is my boy. Like if I could be anything, I love the Creature from the Black Lagoon. But when I was younger, I used to draw pictures of werewolves all the time. Half man, half beast. Like it would be like literally like a straight down line the body. And over here is like this guy with tons of blood and hair. And then over here is like a perfectly smiling man. And like that was like my picture of what a werewolf, I guess, mid-transformation would look like. And I just always, there was just something about the power. I think something about the idea of just this, like this creature being wild. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in the woods. So to me, like, I think if any creature was going to come out of the woods at night, it was going to be a werewolf. Like we had 75 acres of land.
Wow.
So
yeah.
Yeah. Just forest everywhere except our little house in the middle of it. And we'd have coyotes, you'd hear them howling at night.
There aren't any coyotes in England.
The house was creaking, and I'm not, it sounds like I'm making this up like into a horror movie, but I'm really like, this is where we grew up, you know, like in the pitch black. There were no street lights, very much out there. And I think you know, the young brain blossoming, that's the monster that would come out of the woods as a werewolf. Like that just makes sense to me. So I feel like growing up, I was like, yeah, I would be a werewolf. Like I live in the woods already. This just makes sense.
It's you're just being logical. It's like,
I mean, you have to be logical about these things. I couldn't be the creature because there isn't a swamp or a lake nearby. So I'm a werewolf. And I loved animals growing up in general. Like it was, you know, like, and I feel like Frankenstein isn't an animal. He's a monster put together by dead body parts. Like, you know what I mean? That's a different thing. The creature, as much as I love him, is very much Amazon in the water. A werewolf is an animal. A werewolf is definitely something that you can relate to on a little bit of a different level, between just like, you know, you go outside and you see a coyote in the front yard and you could wonder, like, is that a coyote or perhaps not?
Right.
You know, like you never know.
Well, and just like from an evolutionary standpoint, it's like sort of we came from that in some way, right? You know, and there is this. Yeah, I think the two-faced thing that you were drawing as a kid feels really apt for just, I think, masculinity in general, you know, in terms of being a man and sort of wanting to, I mean, God, yeah, be that wild person, but then also if you can lose yourself. And for me, I know like drinking is you know, alcoholism, I think is another metaphor with werewolves. You know, I think especially with Lon Chaney being an alcoholic himself, like that's what I think of with the original Wolfman. When you lose control of who you are, that's a scary thing to me. But there also is something about, yes, just being your primal self going in the woods. And there's something about like, I love hiking. I love like backpacking. The first act of American Werewolf in London is like my favorite thing. Yeah. Like I just want to go to the slaughtered lamb and be looked at very weirdly. Those townsfolk are so good.
Should the world know our business? It's murder then murder it is.
Like they don't want to help because basically they think everyone will think they're crazy /
I just want them as more cowardly.
Yeah.
Like, let's sacrifice the new guys and we'll just stay in here and see what happens. Like there's a wild beast out there killing people. Y'all go check that out. Let us know what you find. We're just going to stay right here.
Let's let the fucking Americans die. Yeah. And, you know, and fair enough. Well, and when they actually band together, they kill the werewolf fairly easily, you know.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh, oops. I guess if we'd gotten here 5 minutes earlier, everything would have been fine. Sam, come on, get on that, bud. Come on.
Yeah, and they have that joke where like you don't need a silver bullet in this world. Like it's just he just gets shot a couple times and he's dead. So there, it all could have been avoided with communication, which I think is another, a key thing.
I mean, communication in horror films in general is probably something that a lot of them need to work on, the characters in these movies, but
that's true. Yeah, that's really fun. I mean, The Howling has the same thing, right? This couple can't communicate and she's going through trauma, but is unwilling to trust her husband after it, and sort of understandably so. But then because he has been closed off, he goes to Marcia, you know, the sort of temptress wolf woman in the woods. Also, you know, again,
she promised that her nudity would not be in the film, and it was. And she got really pissed about that. But they actually kind of promised that like the smoke from the fire would be like billowing in front of her, and it would just be like, you know, her there, and you wouldn't see anything. And then when you watch the movie, it's like, not so much. There isn't really any smoke at all.
I don't know if I like that story, Joe Dante. Yeah, that's
pissed about that.
I think justifiably so.
And rightfully so. Yeah, absolutely. Like,
yeah, damn.
Bag.
Naughty.
Yep, I know.
When did these movies find you?
So I had an interesting little bit of arc to becoming a horror enthusiast. I love The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I was introduced to probably around 4 or 5 years old. I remember we had the VHS tape with a yellow background and then in the cover, the black, you know, hand forward. And we had all three of them: Creature Revenge of the Creature and The Creature Walks Among Us. And then that introduced me into Universal Monsters. And that was probably my childhood, so to speak, with horror. And then moving into like 7th, 8th grade, I decided that I found serial killers very fascinating. And so I wanted to read all the Silence of the Lambs book. Hannibal was coming out in theaters when I was right around that, when I was that age. So I wanted to see Hannibal in theaters. I wanted to read all the books. And I did. I found that absolutely fascinating. And then in 10th grade, I grew up being obsessed with film music. And I was in a coffee shop and I actually overheard two college professors talking about a course they were putting together about horror movies, and it's horror movies and its connection to society and how it affects society, or is more a reflection of society, which obviously is a different conversation, but horror movies in general reflect the fears of the decade, right?
Absolutely.
Like the easy ones are, science fiction, and as you know, in the 1950s and nuclear bombs, and what are they going to create?
Right, Godzilla, yeah.
Exactly. And it's been that way all through the satanic people becoming absolutely terrified. Is God real? And you get The Exorcist and The Omen, and like it just, whatever society was fearing or wondering about, suddenly our horror movies could be a reflection of that, because that's what people were afraid of at the time, which makes sense. So that's kind of what their class was about, and they were talking about all these horror movies, but they were never mentioning the music. And I was like, sorry guys, but can't talk about Psycho and not talk about Bernard Herrmann. And you can't talk about John Carpenter's Halloween and not the fact that he wrote the music and how much it changed the film. And, in test screenings before that movie even came out, people thought it was almost a spoof until you put the bum, 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 bum. And you suddenly get the idea, this person never stops. He's always coming after you.
Right.
And so they saw like this child that was like 13 and sweating profusely talking about music and horror movies. And they were like, kid, just come in and teach a class. Like, we'll hire you to come teach a guest lecture and come.
Really?
Like, hey, let's do it. Yep. And my mom was a social studies teacher for 7th grade. So I went home and I told her, she was like, cool. Like, you have to put together a syllabus. You've got to do, like, you have an hour and a half to fill. You got to do this. So I was like, all right, let's go. So I went to the VHS store and I just started renting horror movies just across the board. Because I wanted to find, I did everything from the classics. We're talking Bernard Herrmann, Psycho, to, The Ring and Hans Zimmer. And like just Signs and James Newton Howard and how wonderful his music is for M. Night Shyamalan films. And so I went through the whole thing and I kind of took them through stingers and the stuff that you see in horror movies where, what is that jump scare? How do you get that red herring? And you're going to go up and like something like, and how that affects the film. And let's watch it with the music playing. And then let's watch Psycho when she's driving without the music, and how literally it's just like 10 minutes of her being like this. And then and like suddenly you're feeling the hills. You're there with her going, because the music is taking you there. And Vertigo, and how the music just following and playing in these scales just changes the film. And so that was what the course was all about, or the class that I taught. And they asked me to come back every year after that, and I taught multiple classes on it. So I honed it, and then and that became like basically my foundation of horror. Is that's where like that was my introduction to like beyond just like I enjoy this and it's cool. That's where it became more than that for me. That's when it became something I studied. I wanted to learn more about. I wanted to become a master in. I really wanted to, when I become passionate about something, I want to know everything about it. I want to learn what's going on. And so that was my introduction to being like, let's learn about this. Like, this is really, there's so much more going on than meets the eye. People who are horror fans, and I'm like, have you watched any Korean horror movies? And they're like, no, I haven't. I'm like, well, then you definitely need to, because it's, I mean, in American cinema in general, even let's talk American Werewolf in London, right? Before he dies, how long has the nurse known him? Like 2 weeks. And she's like, I love you, David. And then,
yes.
And it's like, wow, that happened fast. But like, there's, even though he's killed, even though at the end of that movie, the werewolf, the beast is destroyed, right? And we do feel sadness because of our last shot as he's there on the ground. And it wasn't him. And there was, like miscommunication and all this kind of stuff took place. There's still a sense of like, I can go to sleep at night because the monster is dead.
Right.
And in American cinema and American horror in general, the monster needs to die. Even at the end of every Michael Myers film, the monster needs to die. And maybe we see him after he's shot and dead, and maybe he's still out there, maybe he's not. But there's a conclusion to like, this is what happened. What I have found in Korean cinema, and also just other French cinema as well, and that isn't the case. The monster doesn't need to die. And when horrible things happen to people, even though the film is ending, those horrible things still happened and they're still devastated. They didn't meet another love interest. They didn't suddenly find that everything's going to be okay and they went home and no, they're still at the grave and that person is still dead. And they're sitting and they're falling on their knees and they're crying. And that is the last scene. And you as the viewer feel devastated. And I think that's fantastic. I think that is absolutely wonderful and something that I would love to see more in of American cinema, because I feel like it would depict and become more terrifying, but in a more realistic way. Bringing it back to The Howling, like I think one of the great things about The Howling is at the end, it isn't a happy ending.
Yes, that's
right.
true.
It's a weird ending, like whatever the hell she turns into. I still don't know to this day.
Yeah, like the female werewolf is
werewolf?
weird. Yeah, it didn't look
very
good.
bizarre, but it doesn't come to a conclusion. It comes out that like, and of course everyone watching is like, well, that was weird. Like weird practice. Change the channel, honey. Like that was just the news is going bonkers. Click. And it is still out there. So that is nice that film, almost more in a comedic way though, does take it to that level of like, well, things aren't over yet, but there wasn't necessarily a happy ending.
Well, yeah, I mean, Dee Wallace gets murdered on camera. Basically, that's the ending of this movie.
That's the end of that.
Yeah, and what is sort of disturbing is, the media is a very important part of that movie, because she is a journalist or a reporter, and yeah, basically we've gotten to the point, even in 1981, where like, oh, we don't, whatever, who cares? This isn't real. That's just effects, which is funny because it is, obviously. But I mean, but now it's almost, we've gone the other way where everyone just believes carte blanche what they read, or see. Yeah. It's sort of this like weird switch, which is no less disturbing in a different way. I want to talk real quick about the pandemonium scene in American Werewolf in London. That's one of my favorites, where
the werewolf is loose and everyone's
and it's it's just a maelstrom. It's not even really him killing people; it's people killing each other because they're so panicked.
Yeah,
and to me, that is so, you don't see that I feel like as much, or it's just like that to me is scarier because there's one werewolf, but then all that did was create just like this domino effect of everyone panicking, everyone just slamming into each other. And it also felt very real to me. Like this is a Piccadilly circus that I feel like could happen. All it takes is one wolf or one maniac,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And every people, they all run to the terror. The cops are like, go away. No, we all have to go right into it.
Curiosity killed the cat. We've got to go see with our own eyes.
Well, that's what we do with horror movies in a safe way, right? It's sort of like, oh, I have to see what fucked up thing is in this movie, or like what's torturing this artist or this director or storyteller, or what are they afraid of? And to see if it, goes with my fears, in a really cool way. What's so cool about these movies, it's never about reality. It's about these like ways that they envision or ways they can create these monsters to make each one's different. There's no werewolf that's the same, and that's why
I love the fact. I mean, talking about werewolves and also American Werewolf, like, what's your favorite werewolf? Do you like the idea that it's on four legs, or do you like the fact that it's upright like a human?
That's a good question. I mean, for me, because I was such a Lon Chaney, like the two, but I feel like I like sort of an in between, like sort of more of a hunched two legs, which I guess is sort of The Howling. Yeah. What about you?
I mean, it's hard. It's really hard for me to say because I love the werewolf in American Werewolf in London. I love the fact that it's actually on all four legs and it truly turns into a beast rather than a human / beast. It kind of goes the full distance, so to speak.
Yeah, in a way, it's sort of just a wolf. I mean, a much bigger one. Yeah,
a much bigger one. Approximately 8 feet long, 5 feet wide, 3.5 feet tall, if my dimensions are correct.
Perfectly to scale. I love that. That's great. I was going to ask you, I think this will probably be a sort of the wrap-up question here. It's like, you mentioned that horror movies reflect the times, and the music as well is sort of a huge component in that. But I was wondering why there was so many werewolf movies in 1981, and what is it? I mean, there's four in 1981 alone, and I'm just wondering why you think that is, or what was in the water? Why are we getting wolfish in 1981?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I would almost say, unfortunately, my brain goes to the idea that speaking about the practical effects, I think there's an excitement behind, think about James Cameron waiting how many years to do Avatar? Right. All these years of finally, like, I have a vision, but I can't do it yet. I can't fulfill it the way I want to. And I feel with the explosion of horror, 1978 with Halloween coming out, and then you get Friday the 13th, and suddenly it is everything going into the movies. Directors or people who are artistic suddenly had these dreams, perhaps, that were kind of sitting in the back burner, being like, it would be really cool to finally do a horror movie or a werewolf movie justice, where it's not the idea of like the screen. It's suddenly like, I feel like there was suddenly an advancement in technology where what they could dream in their mind and on paper could suddenly be put on screen. And yes, you had to have the right players. You had to have the Rob Bottin, you had to have Rick Baker, but they were there. They were really ready and willing to suddenly jump in and like, let's try some new stuff. Let's make this happen with an excitement. And so part of me believes that it was almost like everyone was there at the right time, at the right place.
I think that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
There's an explosion of horror going on. Halloween 2 comes out in 1981. 4 werewolf movies come out in 1981. Evil Dead comes out. Like, all of these films that we look back on as classics now all suddenly come out within this like 3, 4, 5 year span. And a lot of them, right there along one another, because at the time, what we had dreamed for many years was now possible. And the audiences were willing to eat it up. Studios were like, yeah, you got a werewolf movie idea? You got a horror movie idea? Let's make it. It's bringing in tons of money right now. So that's
the main thing for them.
Exactly. It's like these people that had been waiting this really long time with these really cool ideas or these gifts or abilities to make creatures like this and put them on screen. Suddenly, the right place, the right time, go. Here's the money. Make it happen. And people just came out of the shadows that were amazing, that had never given a chance before, like Rob Bottin, and just hit a home run. So more so than I think in this instance, I don't see werewolves representing a fear or a societal thing, as more suddenly it's what are we capable of, and where people were hungry for horror, and people had been waiting anxiously to finally come forward and be like, let's do this right. And it all just hit at the right time.
That I think I totally agree, because it actually reminds me of sort of what we've seen in the last 15 years in terms of superhero movies, where all these people had the same dreams about superheroes and the ability to do these with technology. And for so long, it was unable to do it. It was too campy. That was the only way you could do it. And now it's ubiquitous and it's making money. So everyone's like, oh, make your superhero movie. And so it feels like we're in that same moment. And to me, there's something interesting about those two things. So right now, what we all want is superheroes to save us from this world that we're in that's fucking terrifying. And then I think what's interesting in the 80s or 70s, it's the idea that monsters are lurking in us or they're out there, and sort of poking holes. I mean, we have Vietnam or post-Vietnam, but also like the 80s is sort of like all aggressive action movies, or all like, pie in the sky, big American
like all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is sort of showing the hypocrisy of that, or the fact that, the two-face element, like you as a kid felt in yourself, that like I am both wolf and man, and that's terrifying. And I think, but also like accepting that and knowing that we can be both of those things is what I think maybe was missing in politics, certainly, or in the, in the movies. It's sort of like, oh, America is great, that sort of idea. And I think that to me feels like maybe why that was coming out in that way. But I also think it's exactly what you said, where these people were around and ready, and the technology and the money was there.
The budget was suddenly there. It was like the floodgates opened, and it was like acceptable to be like, yeah, go make this horribly ugly thing that before nobody really wanted to see, but now I'm really interested in seeing because it's making us a lot of money. And really talented were like, okay, like, let's go do this. Like,
right, that's like my dream. Oh yeah, I get to make the gross. Yeah,
like before you change your mind, I'll be right back. Let me get my drawings and like show you this terribly ugly creature that you're gonna give me lots of money to make. Like, it's really cool.
Can we get back there? To me, I miss that, because CGI has a lot of good things about it, right? But I don't go to the movies to see a computer like rendered thing that's really accurate. You know, like I know a movie is not real, so I want to see more practical effects. I can only imagine what they can do with that and CGI in tandem.
I know.
Like, so I think that, to me, I'm hoping we can go back here.
I mean, and again, I love the fact that you brought that up, because just talking about werewolves, let's talk about the remake of the Wolfman for a second. That was an instance where they went back to practical effects, and it was the strongest part of the movie, in my opinion. Like, I'm not a fan of that movie. I thought it was okay, but every scene where he's transforming into a werewolf, and there is a mixture of practical effects, heavy practical effects, and then a little bit of CGI rather than the other way around.
Right.
It's just amazing. It's so cool to watch. It's just like, oh, you're back. You're almost at a theater production, and you can be even more immersed in it because you can relate more. You can understand what's going on the screen. Like, yeah, maybe you can tell it's makeup, but at the same time, there's something really cool about that. There's something really, like, you can be more a part of the action. And I think having something real, even though I might know that it's fake, the fact that it's real, I think sometimes grounds you more in that film and makes you believe what you're seeing on screen could and will and possibly may happen. Where as soon as you see it as a computer, you're like,
yeah, your eyes glaze over, you know.
Yeah.
And I that happens in every third act of movies where it's just like CGI, and I'm just sort of like, I mean, it's not going to look any different. I've seen this before, you know, and I haven't seen, however, Rob Bottin made this werewolf, or, you know, whoever is the, you know, the new Rob Bottin, right?
Okay.
And there are so many of those people out there, and I can't wait to see them. So I mean, that's this coffee is for them, and for, I think the money will be out there. I mean, people still have a ravenous hunger for horror, right?
They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And it's changing with the times, but I think if we bring something back from the olden days,
Yes.
I think it may come as fresh as old, as, you know, what was once old is now new. I think that we would see it with new eyes and say, wow, this is really cool and unique. I think we should do more of this. And I agree with you. I hope that does happen.
Awesome. Well, Dylan, thank you so much for joining me. This is the first time we've met or talked. We talked on the phone briefly. A mutual friend sort of connected us, and I'm really thankful that you, you know, took time to share your collection and talk wolves with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, there's nothing better, I don't think.
What's the next thing we want to talk about? Let's just pull up another movie. Let's do this.
Hey, all right. I mean, we got to go to creatures now. We got to go to the swamps. Right. So Dylan, thanks again. And as always, this whole month I've been doing it in conjunction with a fundraiser for the Trevor Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping LGBTQ plus youth. And so if you can spare anything, I know times are tough. There's going to be information below where you can give to the fundraiser. I'd really appreciate it. It's a great cause. Trevor Project is a great foundation. My next adventure, my next tromping into the moors, what monster will I find? Oh God, I don't even remember in this moment. Oh, I do remember in this moment. Let's howl at the moon for the friends we miss, the friends we wish were here to see this. Oh! Oh!